She begged them not to destroy the only thing keeping her family afloat. But in broad daylight, a racist cop smashed her truck, laughed in her face, and left her daughter crying on the side of the road. What he didn't know, her brother, quiet, distant, deadly, was already coming home. And this town had no idea what was coming next. Before we continue this powerful story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another powerful story you won't want to miss. The sun had barely risen over Pine Valley when Monica Harris pulled her threadbare jacket tight against the early morning chill. Inside their small two-bedroom home, the walls still carried the faint scent of last night's dinner and the muffled hum of a neighborhood waking up too soon. But there was no time for comfort here. Monica was already in motion, moving from room to room like a woman fighting a clock that never gave her a break. In the next room, her daughter Trinity wrestled with a tangled ponytail and a stubborn backpack zipper. She was only 9, but the weight of the world already rested on her tiny shoulders. "Mom, where's my math book?" Trinity's voice cracked through the quiet like a falling branch. Monica's fingers stilled on the coffee pot as a sharp pang struck her chest. Another day, another morning scramble. She wiped her hands on her jeans and headed to Trinity's room, retrieving the math book from beneath a pile of worn-out shoes. "Right here, baby," Monica said gently, placing the book into Trinity's backpack. "Let's get you ready, we're already running late." The old pickup truck coughed to life in the driveway, its engine grumbling against the cold. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Monica had kept it running through prayers, patchwork repairs, and more oil changes than she cared to count. That truck got Trinity to school, got Monica to both of her jobs, and kept food on their table. Without it, they had nothing. Monica packed 2 sack lunches, simple sandwiches with the last of the peanut butter and jelly. Payday wasn't until Friday, and her paycheck was already spoken for. Overdue rent, a light bill on the edge of shutoff, and a grocery list she couldn't afford to fill. But she smiled for Trinity's sake, because moms didn't cry in the morning. Moms stood tall, even when they were breaking inside. As they stepped outside, the neighborhood was still quiet. A few porch lights flickered. Mr. Gonzalez, the retired veteran across the street, waved good morning from his porch. He'd been watching out for Monica and Trinity ever since their father left, ever since things got hard. "Morning, Mr. G," Monica called, loading Trinity into the passenger seat. "Morning, Monica. Stay safe out there," he called back, voice steady but knowing. She didn't need to ask what he meant. In Pine Valley, stay safe meant watch your back. The sheriff's department didn't look kindly on people like her. Monica started the truck and glanced at Trinity through the cracked rearview mirror. "You ready to show the world what you're made of today?" she asked, forcing a grin. Trinity smiled, missing front tooth and all. "Always." They pulled out of the driveway and onto the quiet county road. The sun rose higher, painting the tall grass in gold. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. But just as they rounded the bend past the Miller Creek sign, something shifted. A sheriff's cruiser appeared behind them, close, too close. Monica's stomach tensed. She adjusted the mirror, her fingers tightening on the wheel. "Mom?" Trinity's voice was small. "It's fine, baby," Monica said, though her voice betrayed her. "It's just a patrol car." But deep down, Monica knew better. No one patrolled this road at this hour. And no one followed that close, unless they wanted trouble. The cruiser stayed glued to Monica's bumper for nearly half a mile, its headlights too bright, too aggressive. Monica eased her foot off the gas, signaling with a gentle tap of her brakes. A universal sign, back off, give some space. But the car didn't back off. It surged forward, creeping closer, daring her to react. Monica's pulse quickened. She kept her hands steady on the wheel, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she missed a taillight, a registration sticker? Was it her plates? But she knew better. This wasn't about a traffic violation. This was about who she was. A black woman driving alone on a country road. And for men like the ones in that cruiser, that was enough. Trinity peeked over the dashboard, her small brow furrowed. "Mom, why is he following us?" Monica swallowed hard. "It's going to be okay, baby. We're almost at the diner." But they didn't make it to the diner. As they approached the intersection near an abandoned mill, the cruiser suddenly cut to the left, accelerating hard and sideswiping the rear of Monica's truck. The impact jarred the truck violently. Tires screeched. Monica fought to control the wheel as the truck fishtailed across the gravel shoulder. "Hold on," she shouted, reaching for Trinity with one arm, as the truck lurched sideways and skidded to a stop, dust and gravel choking the air around them. Monica's heart pounded against her ribs. She killed the ignition, took a breath, and tried to calm herself. Before she could unbuckle her seatbelt, the driver's door to the cruiser slammed shut. Deputy Wyatt Barton, heavy-set, red-faced, with the cruel smirk of a man who'd been waiting for this moment all day. He approached like a predator, slow and deliberate, one hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. Monica rolled down her window halfway, keeping her hands visible on the steering wheel, just as her mother had taught her. "Good morning, Deputy," she said, voice calm but firm. "Is there a problem?" Barton leaned down, his shadow filling the cabin of the truck. Well, he drawled, voice dripping with sarcasm. "A stolen truck, resisting arrest, and running from law enforcement. Quite the morning, Miss Harris." Monica's stomach dropped. "That's a lie," she said quietly. "This is my vehicle, you know that. I've lived in this town my whole life." Barton's smirk widened. "Funny, I don't recall asking for your autobiography." He stepped back, placing a hand on his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 6. I've got a black female suspect in possession of a stolen vehicle, resisting arrest. Send a tow truck. Repeat, send a tow..." There was no response, because there was no dispatch. Barton had switched to a dead frequency, just for show. Monica's jaw tightened. "Step out of the vehicle," Barton ordered. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said, her voice shaking despite her resolve. "My daughter's in the car." Barton's face darkened. "You can either step out or I'll drag you out. Your choice." Trinity's voice trembled from the passenger seat. "Mommy, what's happening?" "Stay buckled, baby. Don't move," Monica whispered. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt, keeping her hands visible. "I'm complying," she said aloud. But compliance meant nothing to men like Barton. The moment she opened the door, he grabbed her arm roughly, yanked her out of the cab, and slammed her against the hood of the truck. The metal was hot, burning against her cheek. "Black female in custody," Barton muttered under his breath, snapping the cuffs tight around her wrists. "And there goes your morning commute." Behind them, Trinity screamed, "Leave my mom alone." But Barton didn't even flinch. Barton dragged Monica backward, shoving her to the gravel shoulder like she was nothing more than trash to be tossed aside. "Nice truck," he sneered. "Be a shame if it disappeared." A tow truck rounded the bend moments later, as if it had been waiting nearby. The driver barely glanced at Monica as he hooked chains to her truck, lifting the battered old vehicle off the ground like it was scrap metal. "Wait," Monica shouted, struggling against the cuffs. "That's my only way to get to work. You can't..." Barton silenced her with a sharp glare. "Should have thought of that before you broke the law," he said, loud enough for the few bystanders gathering at the gas station. Across the street, phones came out. A couple of people started filming, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. But Barton didn't care. He walked back to his cruiser, whistling a tune, leaving Monica on the side of the road, wrists burning, knees scraped raw from the gravel. Across the street, Trinity ran to her, tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees beside her mother, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "It's gonna be okay, baby," Monica whispered, forcing the words through the lump in her throat. "It's gonna be okay." But inside, she didn't believe it. Not yet. A neighbor's live stream captured the whole thing. Trinity's sobs, Monica's trembling hands, Barton's smug smile as he drove away, dust trailing behind his cruiser. That video would be shared thousands of times before the day was over. But for Monica, the nightmare had only just begun. The house felt colder when they returned home, though the afternoon sun still streamed through the broken blinds. Monica sat at the kitchen table staring at her empty hands. Trinity sat beside her, silent for once, her small face streaked with dried tears. Monica wiped her face roughly, angry at herself for crying in front of her daughter. But no matter how hard she tried to stop, the tears kept coming, falling faster than she could catch them. The truck was gone. Her job was gone. And tomorrow's bills would come knocking, unforgiving and cold. She pressed her hands against her face and let out a slow, broken breath. For years, she'd handled everything herself. Every broken pipe, every overdue bill, every cruel glance from those who thought a single black mother was a walking mistake. But this was different. This was a message, a warning, and she didn't know how to fight it. "Mom," Trinity whispered, voice small, "what are we gonna do?" Monica shook her head. "I'll figure it out. I always do." But Trinity wasn't convinced. "Maybe we should call Uncle Marcus." The words hung in the air like a crack in glass. Monica froze. They hadn't spoken to Marcus in years. The last time they talked, words were sharp and painful. He had walked away from Pine Valley, from their family, leaving Monica to raise Trinity alone. But Trinity wasn't wrong. Marcus was the only one who knew how to handle people like Barton. She hesitated, fingers trembling over her phone. What would she even say? "Hey, Marcus, remember that quiet little hometown you ran from? Turns out, it didn't change." But before she could stop herself, she scrolled to his number. One deep breath. She hit call. Voicemail. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Marcus, it's Monica. I know it's been a long time, but I need you. I didn't know who else to call. They destroyed my truck, Marcus. They dragged me out in front of Trinity like I was nothing. And I can't do this alone. Please, please come home." She ended the call, her thumb hovering over the screen, heart pounding. For a long time, there was only silence. Then Trinity took her hand. "He'll come, Mama. I know he will." Monica gave her daughter a tired smile, but deep down, she wasn't sure if Marcus would ever answer. But in that moment, hope was the only thing they had left. Hundreds of miles away, beneath the blistering sun of New Mexico, Marcus Harris wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted the sights on his rifle. The private security team he led had just completed a high-risk escort for an international energy firm. It was another job that paid well, but left him hollow inside. Marcus lived like a man running from ghosts. A rugged trailer in the desert, weapons locked away but never out of reach. A half-empty duffel bag always packed, ready to leave at a moment's notice. He thought he'd left Pine Valley behind for good. The lies, the heartbreak, the quiet battles against men who smiled in church but spat venom behind closed doors. But as his phone buzzed against the steel workbench, something inside him shifted. Monica's name flashed on the screen. He froze. They hadn't spoken in years, not since that fight, not since he walked away. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button, but the call ended before he could decide. A voicemail followed. He stood alone in the stillness of his trailer, staring at the cracked phone screen. Pressing play, Monica's voice filled the room. Broken, desperate. "Marcus, it's Monica. I know I've been a long time, But I need you. I didn't know who else to call. They destroyed my truck, Marcus. They dragged me out in front of Trinity like I was nothing. And I can't do this alone. Please, please come home." The words hit him harder than any bullet ever had. His shoulders tensed, jaw clenching, as he processed what she'd said. The old anger stirred. Pine Valley, Barton, the same sickness still rotting that town from the inside out. He grabbed his laptop and began pulling names. Wyatt Barton, Sheriff Reed Blackwell, Pine Ridge Security. The same name, the same corruption. A handful of abuse complaints against Barton. Blackwell buried, forgotten, all protected by Blackwell's crooked smile. Different day, same disease. Marcus opened a secured channel and sent a coded message to his old military unit. Need intel. Pine Valley, Tennessee. Sheriff Blackwell, Deputy Barton. Any known affiliations. Adverm Pine Ridge presence. Seconds later, the responses poured in. Confirmed. Pine Ridge Security. Former military contractors working as private enforcers in rural counties. Multiple reports of abuse, but no federal oversight. Marcus's face hardened. This wasn't just about Monica anymore. This was bigger. And it was personal. He stood slowly, walking toward his weapons locker. One by one, he laid out his gear on the table. Body armor, tactical headset, concealed carry holsters. It wasn't the first time he'd gone to war. But this time, it was for family. And he was going home. The desert wind rattled the windows of Marcus's trailer as he packed the last of his supplies into a battered duffel bag. He stood for a moment in the doorway, scanning the horizon one final time. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the empty fields. For years, this quiet had been his refuge. Now it was a prison. He slammed the door shut behind him and tossed the bag into the bed of his old black F-100. The engine roared to life, its deep growl breaking the stillness of the desert. With one final glance at the mountains behind him, Marcus pulled onto the highway and pointed his truck east, toward Pine Valley, toward the fight he thought he left behind. As the miles stretched ahead, his mind replayed Monica's voicemail over and over, every word carved deeper into his resolve. The road was long, but Marcus had driven longer distances, under worse circumstances. Combat deployments, extraction missions, rescue operations. But this one was personal. Meanwhile, back in Pine Valley, Deputy Wyatt Barton lounged in his cruiser outside the Rusty Spur bar, legs kicked up on the dash, a toothpick hanging from his smirking lips. He scrolled through his phone, watching clips of the viral video from earlier that day, his assault on Monica, Trinity's screams, and the comments section below it. Hundreds of angry voices demanding his badge, his arrest, his resignation. He laughed. "These folks don't know how things work around here," he muttered, licking the phone off and tossing it onto the passenger seat. Sheriff Reed Blackwell was less amused. Inside his office, Blackwell poured himself a stiff drink, staring at the screen replaying the same footage. This wasn't supposed to happen. Barton was supposed to scare Monica into silence, not spark a wildfire across social media. But the sheriff didn't panic. He picked up his phone and dialed a number few people in town knew he had. "Get Pine Ridge ready," Blackwell said flatly. "If this blows up, we'll need them to clean up the mess." On the other end, a gravelly voice responded without hesitation. "Consider it handled." Pine Ridge Security wasn't an official part of the sheriff's department. They were mercenaries, private contractors who handled problems when the law got too messy. And now, Monica Harris was a problem. Back on the highway, Marcus's phone buzzed beside him. He tapped his earpiece. "Go ahead." Jordan Reyes's voice crackled through. "Marcus, thought you'd buried this town for good. When it's hurting my family." Jordan chuckled dryly. Well, it's hurting worse than ever. Blackwell's got Pine Ridge on speed dial, and Barton's been running roughshod over the whole county. Same game, different decade. Any intel on their next move? Marcus asked. Rumor is they're planning to file criminal charges against Monica tomorrow. False charges. Theft, assault, maybe resisting arrest. Anything to smear her name before this thing goes statewide. Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. That's gonna happen. You're riding into a hornet's nest, brother. They own the courts, the cops, maybe half the town council. You sure you're ready for this? Marcus's voice was steady, cold. Wasn't a question. Jordan paused, then sighed. All right, I'll prep what I can on my end. You'll need clean communications, eyes on their radio chatter, and someone to ghost your digital trail. Send it to my sat phone, Marcus said. I'll be in town before sunrise. The line went dead. Behind him, the desert faded into night. Ahead, the dark roads of Tennessee stretched out like a gauntlet waiting to be run. Back in Pine Valley, Blackwell leaned back in his chair, convinced the storm was already behind him. What he didn't know was that the real storm was still coming, and it was driving straight for him. The first thing Marcus noticed as he crossed into Pine Valley was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, watchful quiet of a town holding its breath. The streets that once bustled with families and corner stores now sat half empty. Storefront windows were cracked, some boarded up, others plastered with eviction notices and foreclosure signs. The town hadn't changed, it had rotted. Marcus pulled his truck into Monica's driveway just after sunrise. The house looked smaller than he remembered, worn, weathered, and tired. Like Monica, like this town. He stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. The front door creaked open. Monica stood there, arms crossed over her chest, exhaustion written across her face. Her wrist, bruised and swollen, caught his eye immediately. For a moment, they said nothing, years of distance and pride hanging between them. Then Trinity peeked out from behind her mother, wide-eyed and hesitant. "Uncle Marcus?" she whispered. Marcus forced a smile. "Hey, kiddo." Trinity rushed into his arms, nearly knocking him off balance. She clung to him tight, small and shaking. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breath. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner," he said quietly. Monica watched them, a tear slipping down her cheek before she could stop it. After a long pause, she stepped aside. "Come in, we've got a lot to talk about." Inside, the house was quiet except for the ticking of a second-hand clock on the wall. Monica poured them both coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she set the mugs down. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the same one where they used to sit as kids, arguing over cereal boxes and Sunday comics. But today, there was no laughter. Only the weight of everything they had lost. Monica finally spoke. "Wyatt Barton, he did this to me. He destroyed my truck, humiliated me in front of my daughter." Marcus's jaw clenched. "And Sheriff Blackwell?" Monica nodded, bitterness rising in her voice. Covered it up like he always does. Same old story. Marcus took a slow breath. "But..." Monica met his gaze, something flickering behind her tired eyes. "Marcus, you can't fight the whole town." His voice was quiet, steady. "Watch me." Later that afternoon, Marcus drove down a winding back road, lined with rusting mailboxes and forgotten fences. He pulled into a mechanic's lot where the sign barely hung straight, reading, "Reyes Auto Repair." The garage door was open, the scent of oil and burnt rubber filling the air. Beneath the hood of an old Chevy stood Jordan Reyes, grease-streaked, gray at the temples, but still sharp-eyed and fast-talking. Jordan wiped his hands on a rag and grinned when he saw Marcus step out of the truck. "Well, hell froze over. Marcus Harris, I figured you were halfway across the world by now." "Didn't plan on coming back," Marcus said, "but Pine Valley didn't leave me much choice." Jordan's smile faded. "Yeah, I saw the video. Barton finally picked the wrong family, huh?" Marcus crossed his arms. He did more than that. He made it personal. Jordan tossed the rag onto his workbench and nodded toward the back office. "Come on, let's talk where the walls won't listen." Inside, the office was cluttered with old radios, spare parts, and a dusty laptop humming quietly in the corner. Jordan booted up a second computer, fingers flying across the keys. "I've been tracking Pine Ridge security for months. They're not just muscle, they're running surveillance, intimidation, even handling evictions. Sheriff Blackwell's been paying them under the table to clear out the south side of town. Black families, immigrant families, anyone who can't fight back." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Land deal," Jordan explained. "Developers want to build luxury condos where our families have lived for generations. Blackwell pushes people out, Pine Ridge makes sure they don't come back, and the developers get their land cheap." Marcus stared at the screen as files and photos scrolled past. Surveillance reports, falsified arrest records, lists of targeted addresses. "Where does this go?" Marcus asked. "State level, maybe higher. But here's the problem. Nobody in this town's gonna testify. They're scared." Marcus straightened. "Then I'll make them afraid of something else." Jordan gave a grim chuckle. "Same old Marcus. I figured you'd say that." Without another word, Marcus grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. The sheriff's department sat on Main Street like a fortress. Tan brick, dark windows, and a flag that barely moved in the still afternoon air. Inside, the deputies loitered near their desks, eyeing Marcus like an intruder. He walked straight through the lobby and stopped at the front desk. "Tell Sheriff Blackwell Marcus Harris is here to see him." One deputy smirked, another whispered something under his breath. But Blackwell came. He emerged from his office, tall, smug, wearing the same polished badge Marcus remembered from years ago. "Well, look who finally crawled back," Blackwell drawled. "I figured you'd come running home eventually." Marcus didn't flinch. "Call off Barton, drop the charges against Monica, and shut Pine Ridge down." Blackwell laughed, slow and deliberate. "You must have forgotten how things work around here. We run things our way. You don't like it? There's the road." Marcus stepped closer, voice low and calm. "This town doesn't belong to you." Blackwell's smile never faded. "No, but I hold the keys." For a moment the whole department watched in silence, waiting to see who would blink first. Marcus turned and walked out, but his message lingered like smoke in the air. The fight was just beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Pine Valley's empty streets as Marcus left the sheriff's office. He paused at the edge of the sidewalk, staring down Main Street, where the flags hung limp and silent. In that moment, every instinct told him to leave, to disappear back into the life he'd built far away from this rotting town. But then he remembered Monica's bruised wrist, Trinity's wide, terrified eyes. Turning his back wasn't an option anymore. Marcus slid his phone from his pocket and scrolled through his old contacts. He hesitated for just a breath before hitting send. The first call went to Caroline Jennings, a local reporter who had once tried to expose corruption in Pine Valley. Years ago, Blackwell had smeared her name and driven her from her paper, but she'd kept digging from the outside, waiting for a crack in his armor. When Marcus called, she answered on the first ring. "Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again, Harris," Caroline said, voice sharp but steady. "Blackwell made it personal," Marcus replied. "I've got names, records, and proof. I need you to help me put it in front of the whole town." There was a long pause. Then Caroline spoke. About time somebody brought this to light. I'm in. The next call went to Kenny Zhao, a former Marine turned community organizer. Kenny had spent years trying to unify Pine Valley's fractured neighborhoods. But every time he built something, Pine Ridge tore it down. "Brother," Kenny said after Marcus laid out the situation, "you just say where and when. People have been waiting for a reason to fight back." By sundown, Marcus sat at Jordan's shop, surrounded by a half a dozen voices from Pine Valley's fractured past. Old teachers, church leaders, activists, and veterans. People who had watched their town crumble piece by piece, but never stopped believing it could be rebuilt. Marcus laid out the plan. Blackwell controlled the courthouse, the sheriff's office, and Pine Ridge's hired guns. But he didn't control the streets, the stories, or the truth. They would gather evidence, body cam footage, financial records, illegal eviction orders, and leak it in pieces, enough to turn the town against Blackwell before he could silence them. Jordan tapped his laptop, pulling up the first files. Already working on it, found encrypted payment transfers from a real estate firm in Nashville to a Pine Ridge shell company. This whole thing's a land grab. Caroline leaned forward, eyes sharp. "We release this slowly, build public pressure. By the time Blackwell realizes what's happening, the state attorney's office will already be watching." But Marcus shook his head. "It's not enough." Everyone looked at him. Marcus's voice was calm but fierce. "We can't just play defense. We have to hit first, expose everything, make it impossible for Blackwell to spin his lies." Jordan frowned. "That means you'll paint a target on your back, Marcus, and on Monica." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Then let them aim at me. I'll take the first shot." Silence settled over the room for a moment, heavy but resolute. Finally, Kenny Zhao nodded. "Then let's get to work." As the meeting broke, Marcus stood alone in the parking lot, watching the last rays of sunlight fade over the distant hills. The town was quiet again. But beneath that quiet, something was stirring. A reckoning was coming. And for the first time in years, Marcus was ready to meet it head-on. The first brick shattered Monica's living room window just after midnight. The crash jolted her awake, heart pounding against her ribs. Trinity screamed from her bedroom, her small voice cracking the darkness like a siren. Monica scrambled to her feet, shards of glass crunching beneath her socks as she ran to Trinity's room. She found her daughter huddled beneath the blankets, sobbing, hands covering her ears. "It's okay, baby, I've got you, Monica whispered, pulling her close. But even as she spoke the words, her own voice shook with fear. Another sound followed, the unmistakable screech of tires outside, and the hollow clang of metal against siding. Marcus burst through the front door seconds later, his face like stone, already pulling Monica and Trinity into the hallway. "Get down, both of you! Stay away from the windows!" The porch light flickered as Marcus peeked through the blinds. His jaw tightened at what he saw. Spray painted across the front of the house, in dripping black letters, were the words, "Stay quiet," or "Stay gone." And beneath it, a crude drawing of a noose. Monica covered her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. Trinity clung to her mother's side, trembling uncontrollably. Marcus scanned the street, catching a glimpse of a sheriff's cruiser speeding away at the corner. It wasn't kids. It wasn't random. It was a message. And it came from Barton. Monica sat on the floor, wrapping her arms around Trinity as the adrenaline drained from her body. "I can't do this, Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't put her through this." Marcus knelt beside them, his hands steady on Monica's shoulder. "You can, and you will, because they want you scared. They want you broken. But not tonight. Not ever again." She looked at him, tears streaking her face. "You fight men who think they own everything." Marcus's voice was low but fierce. "You remind them they don't own fear." Outside, the wind rattled the porch swing like a warning bell. But inside, something shifted. Monica wiped her tears and took a breath. No more running. Marcus nodded. Nor fear. By noon the next day, Marcus stood in the middle of Pine Valley's busiest intersection, waiting. The sun beat down on cracked asphalt as shoppers and workers bustled past, casting nervous glances at the man in the worn jacket and combat boots. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was bait. And right on schedule, a sheriff's cruiser roared up Main Street, sirens silent but lights flashing. Deputy Barton stepped out, swagger in every step, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the crowd now gathering at a cautious distance. "Well, well," Barton sneered, his voice loud enough for the sidewalk to hear, "if it ain't the prodigal son making a scene." Marcus took a slow step forward, unflinching. "This ends today, Barton. No more threats. No more midnight messages." Barton laughed, hand resting casually on his belt. "You think some tough talk changes how we run this town? I've been cleaning up streets like these since before you figured out how to shave." Marcus's voice dropped, cold and steady. "You're not cleaning anything. You're poisoning it." The crowd murmured, phones came out, people started filming. And for the first time, Barton hesitated. He glanced at the cameras, calculating. This wasn't the back road anymore. This was the center of town. "You gonna swing first, hero?" Barton challenged. Marcus took another step, close enough for Barton to smell the dust on his jacket. "Not today, but the next time you touch my family, you won't see me coming." For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then Barton stepped back, barely masking the crack in his bravado. "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts," Barton muttered, retreating to his cruiser. The crowd watched him go, whispers spreading like wildfire. Marcus turned, locking eyes with them. "Film everything. Share everything. Don't let them tell you this didn't happen." That afternoon, Jordan released the first wave of evidence. Body cam footage of Barton's brutality. Financial records linking Sheriff Blackwell to Pine Ridge contracts. Leaked emails showing orders to intimidate families in black neighborhoods under the guise of community protection. Local news outlets picked it up first. Then state papers. Then national blogs. Suddenly, Pine Valley wasn't a forgotten town anymore. It was a powder keg. And Marcus had just lit the match. Sheriff Blackwell slammed his office door shut, his face red with fury. He stabbed a finger at Barton. "You let this get out of hand." Barton bristled. "He's making a fool out of us in our own streets." Blackwell poured himself a drink, trying to steady his shaking hands. "If we don't shut him down now, the state will be crawling all over our books by morning." He set down the glass, voice low and cold. "Put out an arrest warrant. Paint him as a dangerous fugitive. Terrorist ties, unstable military vet, whatever you have to do, turn the town against him before he turns it against us." Barton hesitated. "It's a lie." Blackwell's glare could have frozen steel. "Then make it sound true." Outside, the town square buzzed with energy. People talking, people waking up. And for the first time in years, Pine Valley felt alive. But Marcus knew better than to celebrate. This was just the opening round. The real fight was coming when the sun went down. Night fell fast over Pine Valley, and with it came the storm Blackwell promised. The warrant hit the Sheriff's Department bulletin board by 6 a.m. Marcus Harris, armed, dangerous, and wanted for assault on law enforcement. By 7 p.m., patrol cars prowled the streets in tight formation, flashlights slicing through alleyways, boots pounding on doorsteps. And by 8 p.m., they came for Monica's house. 4 cruisers pulled up in front of the home Marcus had sworn to protect. Red and blue lights painted the walls in jagged streaks of color. Deputy Barton stepped out first, his smirk returning, weapon holstered but ready. "All right, boys," he barked, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Let's bring this criminal in." Inside, Monica froze. She hugged Trinity tight, her hands trembling against her daughter's shoulders. Marcus stood by the back door, calm but tense, scanning every angle. "They'll tear this house apart if they think I'm inside," he said, quietly. "Then, what do we do?" Monica whispered, voice breaking. He met her gaze with quiet certainty. "We make them chase shadows." He cracked open the back door, slipping into the darkness like smoke, leaving no sound behind. Moments later, the front door crashed open. "Sheriff's Department," Barton shouted, charging in with his deputies. They tore through the living room, overturned furniture, yanked open closets and cabinets. But the house was empty. No Marcus. No trace. Barton's jaw clenched. "Ye hear? I know it." Monica stood with Trinity by the kitchen table, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "You have no warrant to search this house." Barton stepped close, invading her space, his smile cold. "Lady, your whole life is a warrant." But behind him, the other deputies shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the growing number of neighbors gathering outside. Phones lit the night, recording everything. Barton cursed under his breath and signaled for his men to fall back. "Let's go. He's not here." The cruisers peeled away, their tires screaming against the pavement, leaving Monica and Trinity standing in the doorway, their hearts still racing. Miles away, Marcus crouched behind an old water tower, watching the chaos unfold through binoculars. He exhaled slowly, letting the night air cool the fire in his chest. Jordan's voice crackled in his earpiece. "You clear?" "Now," Marcus replied. "They're painting you as a terrorist on the local news," Jordan said. "Blackwell's throwing everything he's got at." "Let him," Marcus said. "The more noise he makes, the more people will start asking why." But the truth was, Marcus knew the clock was ticking. Sooner or later, Blackwell would realize that force wasn't enough. He would try to destroy Marcus in the court of public opinion. Turn neighbors into enemies. Turn fear into loyalty. And if that failed, he would escalate further. Marcus slid deeper into the shadows, moving like a ghost through the forgotten back roads of his childhood. He had no safe house, no backup. Just his training, his resolve, and the fire of a brother protecting his family. Tomorrow he would strike back. But tonight, survival was the mission. He climbed into an abandoned grain silo on the edge of town, tucked behind the old rail yard, and waited for dawn. In the darkness, his mind played out every next step. He would expose the warrants as fraudulent, leak the sheriff's illegal payments to Pine Ridge, and make sure the world saw what Pine Valley tried to hide. Because one thing was certain, he wasn't running anymore. And he wasn't hiding either. The hunters had just become the hunted. The wind howled across the abandoned industrial park on the edge of Pine Valley, where Pine Ridge security kept their secrets hidden behind chain-link fences and rusted steel gates. Marcus and Jordan crouched in the shadows, cloaked in darkness, watching the perimeter through infrared scopes. "This rotation shifts every 4 hours," Jordan whispered, adjusting his earpiece. 2 men by the east gate, 1 patrolling the south fence line. "Cameras are patched into the sheriff's dispatch, but I've looped the feeds. We've got maybe 15 minutes before someone notices the glitch." Marcus gave a small nod. Plenty of time. They moved fast, cutting through the back fence with bolt cutters Jordan had tucked beneath his jacket. The wire snapped silently in the night air, and the 2 men slipped through like shadows. Inside the compound, the storage facility looked unassuming, just another warehouse with faded logos and peeling paint. But Marcus knew better. Pine Ridge wasn't a security company. It was a war chest. They found the first clue inside a locked steel crate near the main office. Jordan bypassed the keypad in seconds. Inside, stacked neatly on metal racks, were crates of military-grade weapons, R-15s, tactical shotguns, night vision goggles, and crates marked non-compliance that Marcus recognized from overseas deployments. Except, these weren't meant for war zones. They were meant for civilians. Marcus exhaled slowly, his stomach turning. "Been stockpiling for months," Jordan whispered, "ready for something big." Further inside, they found the surveillance servers. Jordan hacked in, fingers flying across the keyboard. Security footage filled the screen. Months of hidden surveillance. Streets, homes, churches. Mostly black neighborhoods. Mostly families. Dozens of faces, names Marcus recognized from his childhood. Tracked. Targeted. And one folder stood out, Operation Clean Sweep. Marcus clicked it open. Eviction orders, police reports, and false criminal complaints filed against families who owned land in the southern districts of Pine Valley. Land developers had already signed purchase agreements, murderous clearance, PLA clearance. The pieces clicked together like a loaded weapon. Pine Ridge and Blackwell weren't just policing the town. They were clearing it out. Forced displacement through law enforcement, Jordan muttered, shaking his head. And no one's stopping them? Marcus clenched his fists. Then we will. He copied everything onto an encrypted drive. Jordan wiped the server logs, erasing their tracks. But as they prepared to leave, movement outside froze them in place. A Pine Ridge patrol car rolled past the gate, headlights sweeping the lot. Marcus signaled Jordan to hold still, breath quiet, heart pounding. The vehicle slowed, paused, then drove on. The silence returned. They slipped out the way they came, disappearing into the night. But the damage was done. They had the proof. And Marcus knew exactly where to use it. Tomorrow, the world would know what Pine Valley's sheriff had been hiding. But tonight, in the dark, Marcus could already feel the storm building. The next morning, a message arrived on Marcus's encrypted phone. No name, just a location. A rundown gas station. On the edge of town, the sender was a number Marcus didn't recognize, but the words were clear. "I have information. Meet alone." Marcus didn't hesitate. He left Jordan monitoring the data leaks and headed for the meeting point. The gas station was nearly abandoned, save for a few rusty pumps and a blinking "open" sign barely clinging to life. Inside, a young woman waited by the soda fridge, her sheriff's department jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. Maria Cortez, a deputy, and one of the only people in Pine Valley who still had a conscience. When Marcus approached, her eyes darted nervously around the empty aisles. "He shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Neither should you," Marcus replied, "but I think you've got something to say." She took a deep breath, the weight of fear pressing on her chest. "I can't do this anymore. Blackwell's been targeting black families for over a year. Anyone who owns property on the south side, he sends Pine Ridge after them. Fake warrants, harassment, forced evictions. It's all tied to a development deal with Crescent Hill Properties." Marcus's stomach dropped. Crescent Hill was one of the biggest real estate developers in the region. "Is working with them?" Marcus asked. Maria nodded, tears brimming. "They're buying up the land dirt cheap. Once the families are gone, they'll build luxury condos, retail centers. None of it for the people who live here now. And anyone who protests gets arrested or worse." She handed Marcus a flash drive, her hands shaking. "Everything's on there. Internal emails, payment logs, property seizures. But if they find out I gave it to you, I'm dead." Marcus placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing. We'll protect you." She shook her head, fear still gripping her. "No one protects whistleblowers in this town. You either shut up or disappear." Marcus met her gaze. She hesitated, then nodded. As Marcus left the gas station, his mind was racing. With Jordan's files and Maria's whistle-blue documents, the full picture came into focus. Sheriff Blackwell, Pine Ridge Security, and Crescent Hill Properties had orchestrated a coordinated conspiracy. Step 1. Label black families as criminal threats through false reports. Step 2. Use Pine Ridge to intimidate and displace them. Step 3. Seize the land for pennies and sell it to developers for millions. It was racial displacement disguised as law enforcement. Marcus called Jordan on the drive back. "Start preparing the drop. I want every reporter in the state to have these files by nightfall." Jordan's voice crackled with determination. "Copy that. I'll get it trending before the morning papers hit the streets." But as they spoke, another message flashed across Marcus's phone. "Gentron for Sir Violet, signed for tomorrow morning." Monica's neighborhood had... Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. Blackwell wasn't waiting for the fallout. He was striking first. If they didn't act fast, Monica's entire neighborhood would be bulldozed by sunrise. The clock was ticking, and Pine Valley was running out of time. By sundown, the clock was no longer counting in hours. It was counting in lives. Marcus, Jordan, and Monica huddled in the back of Jordan's garage, the soft hum of servers working overtime as encrypted files uploaded to national media outlets. Jordan wiped sweat from his brow. "Almost there. I'm pushing it to every major newswire. By morning, the country will know exactly what's happening here." But Marcus wasn't waiting for morning. "They're coming tonight. Blackwell knows once this story breaks, his game is over. He's going to hit Monica's neighborhood before the press can stop him." Monica sat at the workbench, her fingers shaking as she gripped her phone. "They'll drive out every family, people with nowhere else to go." Marcus knelt beside her, his voice low but fierce. "Normal. Not tonight. You hear me? Not tonight." Jordan tapped his keyboard. He rolled. "The first wave of files will hit national news sites in 10 minutes. Social media will light up within the hour." Marcus grabbed his gear and checked his watch. "We've got one shot to slow them down. Once this story trends, they'll think twice before acting in the open." He loaded a backpack with flares, drone cameras, and a tactical radio. Jordan raised an eyebrow. "What's the plan?" Marcus gave a tight smile. "Chaos. Give the cameras something to see." As Marcus slipped into the night, Monica stared at the map spread across the table. Her neighborhood, her people. They were more than lines and streets. They were lives worth fighting for. Meanwhile, across town, Sheriff Blackwell and Pine Ridge were already staging. Convoys lined the edge of the neighborhood, filled with private contractors and armored trucks. Eviction notices printed and signed. Warrants in hand. Blackwell stood at the command post, staring at his tablet. News alerts were already buzzing. "Chicago's department tied to forced displacement of black families," one headline read. "Illegal land seizures uncovered in Pine Valley," another flashed. Blackwell cursed under his breath. "Leak the counter story," he ordered. "Call them violent agitators, domestic threats, anything to drown this out." But as his team scrambled, another voice cut through the static. It was Marcus, broadcasting live, his face filling phones across the country. "This is Pine Valley, Tennessee," Marcus said, steady and unflinching, "where families are being forced from their homes tonight, not by criminals, but by those sworn to protect them. Sheriff Reed Blackwell, Pine Ridge Security, Crescent Hill Properties, you will not erase these families. Not tonight, not ever." The stream went viral in seconds. News outlets picked it up. Civil rights groups. Celebrities. Thousands of people flooded the comments, demanding answers. Demanding justice. Blackwell slammed his fist onto the table, veins bulging. "Move now," he barked, "before the cameras get here." But it was already too late. Reporters had arrived. State legislators were calling. Federal investigators were watching. And the people of Pine Valley, those who had lived in fear for years, were stepping outside with their phones raised high. Lights in the darkness. Proof they would no longer hide. Blackwell gritted his teeth as his empire began to crack. This wasn't the end. But for the first time, the balance had shifted. The hunted had turned to face the hunters. And Pine Valley would never be the same. The sky turned gray as dawn approached, casting long shadows over Pine Valley's battered streets. Marcus stood in the middle of Monica's neighborhood, surrounded by neighbors, allies, and friends who had spent years feeling powerless. Not today. He spoke calmly but firmly, his voice carrying through the still morning air. "We are not soldiers. We are not criminals. We are families. This is our home, and no one takes it from us." They gathered in a loose circle, church members, shop owners, teachers, veterans, and single parents, people who had lived quiet lives, forced for too long to endure in silence. But Marcus knew resolve wasn't enough. They needed preparation. He led them through simple drills, how to form a line, how to hold their ground without violence. "We don't fight them with fists," Marcus said, walking the line. "We fight them with the truth, with witnesses, with cameras. They want to scare us into running, but today we stand." Jordan helped distribute phones and small GoPro cameras, clipped onto jackets and hats. Every angle recorded, every voice captured. "Streaming live to 5 networks and a dozen advocacy groups," Jordan said, nodding at Marcus. "The moment they try something, the whole country will see." Children watched from porches, some too young to understand, others wise beyond their years. Trinity clutched Monica's hand, her wide eyes watching as Marcus moved through the crowd. "Mom, are we really going to be okay?" Monica knelt down, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. "Ye baby, we're not alone anymore." As the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, the rumble of engines echoed in the distance. Deputy Barton was coming. And this time he wasn't alone. A convoy of sheriff's deputies and Pine Ridge mercenaries rolled down the hill, headlights blazing through the morning mist. Their tires tore across the pavement like wolves circling prey. But waiting for them, shoulder to shoulder, stood a neighborhood that refused to be broken. Phones raised, eyes steady, hearts unshaken. And at the front of them all stood Marcus, silent but ready. He had trained for war, but today he was fighting for peace. And he would not yield. The growl of engines grew louder, echoing between the cracked sidewalls and boarded windows. Then, like a storm crusting the hill, they appeared 4 sheriff's cruisers in front, followed by 2 Pine Ridge tactical trucks, matte black and bristling with gear. Deputy Barton stepped out first, boots hitting the pavement with a thud that sent ripples down the block. His face wore that same smirk Marcus remembered from years ago, arrogant, cruel, certain of victory. "Well, ain't this a sight?" Barton drawled, scanning the crowd. "A bunch of civilians playing soldier. You all really think you're going to stop us?" Monica stood beside Marcus, her hand gripping his sleeve. Trinity stayed behind her, peeking out with wide, fearful eyes. Jordan stood a few feet back, streaming live to thousands. "We're not here to fight," Marcus said, his voice steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're here to tell you, no more. No more stolen homes. No more midnight threats. No more corruption hiding behind a badge. Barton's eyes narrowed. "You're under arrest, Harris. Warrant's been signed. Now step aside before this gets ugly." Marcus took one step forward, the crowd holding firm behind him. "You'll have to drag us all away. On camera. In front of the entire country." Barton hesitated. Phones glared at him like silent witnesses. From the corner of his eye, Barton saw news vans arriving at the end of the block, reporters spilling out, microphones ready, cameras rolling. The sheriff's convoy behind him shifted uneasily. Even some of the deputies exchanged glances, questioning how far they were willing to go. But Barton clenched his jaw and barked to his men. "Clear the street." No one moved. Then came the voices. One by one at first, then rising like a wave. "We live here. This is our home. No justice, no peace." The community didn't scatter. They didn't back down. They stood firm, linked arm in arm, their voices shaking the morning air. The Pine Ridge men, less sure than their leader, hesitated, hands hovering near their weapons. Jordan's voice rang through the earpiece. "Over 50,000 people are watching live, trending nationwide." Marcus knew then. This was bigger than Pine Valley now. It was a mirror held up to the entire country. Barton stepped forward again, fury etched across his face. "Move, or we move you." But his voice lacked the power it once had. The town had finally stopped listening to him and started listening to itself. Then, through the rising tension, the roar of another convoy approached. Different this time. Blue and white cruisers. Marked status. Dozens of them. And behind them, two unmarked black SUVs with federal plates. They pulled up fast, sirens wailing, lights flashing. Barton turned, stunned. This wasn't part of the plan. The lead state trooper stepped out, megaphone in hand. "Harass Blackwell, Deputy Barton. You are ordered to stand down immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The showdown was shifting, and Marcus could feel it. The tide was finally turning. But the next move would decide everything. For a moment, the entire street fell silent. No sirens, no shouting, just the wind cutting between the broken houses and cracked sidewalks. Marcus stepped forward, the morning sun breaking through the clouds and casting his shadow long across the asphalt. He faced Barton head-on, his voice clear and unwavering. "You've spent your whole life hiding behind that badge, Barton, using it to bully families, steal homes, and line your pockets. But this morning, you're out in the open, and the world is watching." Barton's jaw tightened. Sweat beaded at his brow. "You think some cameras are going to save you? You think your little speech means anything? This is my town. Always has been." Marcus shook his head. "No, this town belongs to its people. People who are finally tired of being afraid." The community behind Marcus stood tall, their phones still rolling, their voices rising in quiet defiance. Sheriff Blackwell finally emerged from the rear SUV, his face pale beneath his wide-brimmed hat. He looked older in the daylight, smaller somehow, weighed down by the knowledge that his empire was crumbling. He surveyed the scene, his deputies wavering, Pine Ridge mercenaries shifting nervously, state police and federal agents closing in. He tried to regain control, his voice booming across the street. "Everyone stand down. This is county jurisdiction. These people are resisting lawful eviction orders." But his words rang hollow. The lead state trooper raised his megaphone again. "Sheriff Blackwell, this is now a state investigation. You and your deputies are hereby ordered to surrender your weapons and submit to immediate questioning regarding unlawful use of force, conspiracy, and corruption." Blackwell froze, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Barton turned to him, disbelief flashing across his face. "You promised me backup," Barton hissed. "You said they'd never touch us." Blackwell's shoulders sagged. "They weren't supposed to find out. Not like this." But they had. And there was no covering it up now. Marcus stepped closer, voice steady but sharp. "You used Pine Ridge to terrorize your own town. You sold out families for a few checks from Crescent Hill. You thought no one would fight back. But we did, and now it's over." The state troopers advanced, handcuffs ready. One by one, deputies dropped their weapons. Some stepped aside, hands raised, tired of the lies. Even a few Pine Ridge mercenaries backed away, unwilling to be the last ones standing. But Barton wasn't finished. With a snarl, he drew his weapon, leveling it at Marcus's chest. "You think you're better than me? You think you win today?" Gasps tore through the crowd. Trinity screamed from behind Monica's legs. Marcus stood his ground, unflinching. "You pull that trigger, Barton, and your face will be the last thing America remembers before the entire system comes down on you." For a second, the only sound was the hammer clicking back. And then, a single voice rang out from behind the state police line. "Drop it, Barton." It was Maria Cortez. Her service weapon aimed steady at Barton's head, hands shaking but resolute. "Don't do this. Not for him. Not for anyone." Barton's breath hitched. The weight of years of arrogance, cruelty, and unchecked power collapsed on his shoulders all at once. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his gun. A trooper stepped in, cuffing his wrists. The street erupted, not in violence, but in cheers. Not in chaos, but in relief. Marcus let out a slow breath, finally turning back to Monica and Trinity. They ran to him, arms wrapping tight around his waist. "It's over," Monica whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Marcus shook his head gently. "Over. Just finally right." Federal agents began collecting evidence, taking statements, and loading Barton and Blackwell into waiting cars. But even as the sirens faded, Marcus knew there was still more work to do. He looked over the crowd, neighbors, activists, children, and saw something he hadn't seen in Pine Valley for a long time. And this time, it wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, Pine Valley woke to the sight of flashing lights outside the sheriff's department. But this time, they weren't coming for the innocent. Dozens of federal agents and state marshals poured through the front doors, their boots pounding across the marble floor, their voices clear and direct. "Federal search warrant. Step aside, now." Clerks froze mid-paperwork. Deputies dropped their radios in stunned silence. In the evidence room, two officers pried open steel filing cabinets, pulling out sealed envelopes marked "confidential" and "internal use only." Elsewhere, digital forensics teams tore through computer servers, extracting decades of corruption, financial records, surveillance files, payoffs from Crescent Hill properties, and the names of every family Pine Ridge had forced from their homes. Jordan watched the live coverage from the garage, barely able to suppress a grin. They're pulling the whole thing down, piece by piece. Monica stood beside him, her hand covering her mouth as she watched deputies escorted out in handcuffs, their heads lowered, their faces pale. For years, those uniforms had been a symbol of fear. Today, there were symbols of justice. Across town, another raid unfolded at Pine Ridge Security's headquarters. Black SUVs blocked every exit. Tactical teams stormed the office, rifles at the ready, shouting commands. Inside, men who once terrorized families with midnight raids now cowered behind desks and filing cabinets. One by one, they were led outside, their tactical gear replaced by zip ties and orange evidence bags. Marcus stood at the edge of the Pine Ridge compound, arms crossed, watching as the doors swung open and agents hauled out crate after crate of stolen weapons and surveillance tapes. This wasn't just about Pine Valley anymore. It was a blueprint, a warning to every other town where people like Blackwell and Pine Ridge thought they could operate unchecked. But even in the midst of victory, Marcus's mind stayed sharp. The leaders were still out there. And the biggest name of all, Sheriff Reed Blackwell, had yet to answer for his crimes. That reckoning was coming, and Marcus intended to be there when it did. Deputy Wyatt Barton didn't go quietly. The agents found him at the county line, engine roaring as he tried to outrun the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. But his battered cruiser was no match for the federal blockade, waiting just beyond the next bend. Tires screeched, sirens wailed. And when Barton finally skidded to a stop, the weight of reality came crashing down on him. He stepped out slow, hands raised but mouth still running. "This is a setup. Y'all are making a mistake. I built this town. But no one listened. Cameras lined the road. Reporters captured every word. As the cuffs snapped around his wrists, Barton spat on the ground, his voice laced with venom. Yawning. "You can't stop what's coming. People like me, we don't disappear." But as they led him away, his words echoed hollow. The badge he once hid behind now rested in a plastic evidence bag. The only thing left was his hatred, and even that was powerless now. Back in Pine Valley, Blackwell watched it all unfold from his office window. He had tried to play it smart, had tried to shift the blame to Pine Ridge, to Barton, to anyone but himself. But the leaks were too big, the evidence too clear. And now the walls were closing in. He grabbed a duffel bag from his closet, stuffed with cash and forged passports, and slipped out the back door. But Marcus was already waiting, parked in an alley, engine off, watching the sheriff move through the shadows like a cornered rat. Marcus stepped out, blocking the alleyway, voice low and steady. "Running won't save you, Blackwell." Blackwell froze, eyes darting for a way out. "There's still time to walk away from this," the sheriff hissed. "I can cut you in, make you rich. No one will know." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't come back for money. I came back for justice." Behind him, state marshals closed in, their boots crunching on gravel. Blackwell raised his hands slowly, resignation washing over him. "You'll regret this. This town won't survive without me." Marcus took a step forward, the morning sun breaking through the alley. "It'll survive because you're gone." The marshals cuffed Blackwell and led him away. The man who once ruled Pine Valley with fear now walked the streets in silence, his empire shattered. As the cameras rolled, Marcus stood in the light, knowing this wasn't just a victory for his family. It was a victory for every family. And, for the first time in a long time, Pine Valley could finally breathe. That evening, the streets of Pine Valley filled with voices not crying out in fear, but in joy. For the first time in years, families gathered without looking over their shoulders. Kids rode bikes down sidewalks once lined with sheriff's cruisers. Music played from front porches where silence used to live. Monica stood at the center of it all, Trinity clinging to her side, both of them wrapped in a sea of hugs and handshakes. Neighbors who had once whispered in fear now spoke openly, thanking her for standing when others could not. Jordan raised a toast outside his garage, a smile breaking across his face. Monica, to Trinity, and to the man who reminded us that courage doesn't wait for permission. He nodded toward Marcus, who stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, a rare smile tugging at his lips. But even in celebration, Marcus's mind wandered. He knew corruption didn't die overnight. There would be court cases, appeals, and old enemies waiting in the shadows. But tonight, Pine Valley belonged to its people again. and that was worth celebrating. As the crowd sang and danced beneath strings of borrowed lights, Marcus slipped away, the laughter fading behind him. He drove out past the edge of town, where the pavement gave way to gravel and the noise of the world grew quiet. There, beneath an old oak tree, rested a weathered headstone. His mother's grave, the woman who raised him and Monica, the woman who taught them to fight for what was right, even when it cost them everything. Marcus knelt beside the stone, brushing away leaves with calloused fingers. "Mom, we did it," he whispered. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the branches. But in that silence, Marcus found peace. Stood, looking back toward the faint glow of the town he once ran from, now shining with new light. Tomorrow, the rebuilding would begin. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus wasn't fighting alone. He turned toward the horizon, the weight on his shoulders lighter now. Pine Valley had changed, and so had he. The past no longer owned him. The future was his to build, and he would make sure it was a future worth fighting for. Together. Just when Pine Valley thought the dust had settled, a new storm broke. It began quietly, an investigative article buried in the Sunday morning headlines, but by noon it exploded across social media like wildfire. Developers, sheriffs, and private armies, the hidden empire behind Pine Valley's corruption. Reporters from national outlets dug deeper into the Pine Ridge files Marcus and Jordan leaked. What they uncovered sent shockwaves through the state. At the top of the chain was Crescent Hill Properties, a real estate conglomerate worth billions, whose sleek glass towers lined city skylines across Tennessee. Behind Crescent Hill, names more powerful than Blackwell's emerged. State Senator Thomas Albright, real estate tycoon Evelyn Marston, lobbyists, contractors, political fundraisers, people who had never once stepped foot in Pine Valley but pulled its strings from country clubs and boardrooms hundreds of miles away. It wasn't just about Pine Ridge clearing out neighborhoods for redevelopment. It was about a statewide blueprint, displacing black families from valuable lands under the guise of public safety and economic progress. The articles connected Pine Valley's corruption to other rural towns, towns where black families mysteriously lost land, where community leaders vanished from public life after bogus arrests. The conspiracy was bigger, colder, and older than anyone imagined. Marcus read the reports from Jordan's garage, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the exhaustion in his face. "I thought it stopped at Blackwell," Monica whispered beside him, her voice hollow. "Did I?" Marcus said, jaw clenched. "But we were just the spark. This fire's been burning for decades." Jordan shook his head, scrolling through the mounting evidence. They had it all rigged, the courts, the sheriffs, even the media in some counties. Marcus closed the laptop with a quiet thud. "Then we take the fight beyond Pine Valley. This doesn't end until every last one of them answers for what they did." The victory over Blackwell was just the beginning. The war for justice was far from over. The grand jury convened 2 weeks later in the county courthouse. The marble halls, once silent accomplices to Pine Valley's corruption, now rang with the footsteps of those seeking truth. Marcus, Monica, and Jordan stood side by side, their presence filling the courtroom with quiet defiance. This was no longer about revenge. It was about accountability. The prosecution laid out the conspiracy: forged warrants, false arrests, illegal surveillance, and property theft, on a scale no one in Pine Valley's history had dared to imagine. Witness after witness took the stand. Deputy Maria Cortez, trembling but resolute, described the late-night meetings where eviction lists were drafted over whiskey and cigars. Families testified through tears, recounting the terror of Pine Ridge agents pounding on their doors in the dead of night. And then Marcus stepped forward. He spoke not as a soldier, but as a brother, a son, a protector. "I left this town once, thinking I'd never belong, but evil doesn't stop when you turn your back. It festers. I came home to stop it, and I won't leave until it's gone for good." He met the juror's eyes, steady and unblinking. "You can't unsee what we've shown you. Now you decide whether this town lives in fear or finally breathes free." The courtroom fell silent. But outside those walls, the threats continued. Anonymous notes slid beneath Monica's door. Phone calls with no voice, just static and silence. Cars lingering too long outside the neighborhood at night. Remnants of Blackwell's loyalists hadn't disappeared, they had just gone quiet, waiting for their moment. But fear no longer ruled Pine Valley. The people did. That truth became clear one Saturday afternoon when the town gathered at the community park for a rally. The stage was modest, just a few wooden steps and a crackling microphone, but the crowd was massive. Local reporters mingled with national news outlets. Students, parents, pastors, and veterans filled the lawn. And, at the center of it all, clutching a handwritten speech in both trembling and determined hands, stood Trinity. She was just a child. But that day, she spoke with the heart of a leader. She stepped up to the microphone, clearing her throat against the sea of expectant faces. "Naming Trinity Harris. I'm 12 years old, and this is my home." The wind caught the edges of her paper, but she didn't flinch. "I watched my mom get dragged out of her truck. I watched strangers tear apart our neighborhood. I watched people hurt others just because they thought no one cared." Her voice cracked, but didn't break. You care, and that means they don't win, not anymore." The crowd grew quiet, leaning in. "We don't need armor or guns to protect our homes. We need each other. And we need people to keep watching, to keep asking, to keep fighting. Please don't forget about us after today, because we'll still be here tomorrow, trying to build something better." A hush fell over the crowd. Then applause erupted, loud and unstoppable. It rolled across the park, through the streets, and into every living room tuned into the live stream. Hashtags trended within minutes. "Stand with Power," /Justice for Families. Trinity speaks. By sundown, the rally footage had been viewed by millions. And Pine Valley was no longer just a dot on a forgotten map. It was a beacon, a symbol of resistance and resilience. That night, Monica hugged Trinity close, tears spilling onto her daughter's curls. "You were brave today, baby," she whispered, "braver than I ever was." Trinity smiled softly, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. "I just said what you and Uncle Marcus taught me. You don't give fear the last word." In that moment, under the fading glow of porch lights and stars, Monica knew her family's fight had already changed the world. And the battle ahead, no matter how big, no longer felt impossible. That night, Marcus sat alone on the steps of the old community center, the same one he used to sneak away from as a restless teenager desperate to escape this town. For years he thought leaving Pine Valley was his only shot at survival. He ran from its broken streets, its painful memories, and the shadows of men like Blackwell who seemed untouchable. But no matter how far he went, the roots pulled him back. Now, sitting under the same cracked street lamps, he finally understood. Leaving didn't make him free. Fighting for his home did. Monica found him there, her steps soft on the pavement. "You okay?" she asked, settling beside him. He sighed, the weight of the past and present mingling in his chest. "I thought coming back would break me. I didn't realize it would save me." Monica smiled gently. "You didn't run away, Marcus. You came back when it mattered most. That's what makes the difference." He met her gaze, gratitude softening his features. "We're not done yet." "No," she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder, "but now we're not fighting alone." And she was right. The next morning, communities from across the state began reaching out. Town meetings turned into rallies. Church groups formed legal defense funds. Law students volunteered pro bono to represent displaced families. The fire that started in Pine Valley spread across Tennessee. And what began as one family's stand against injustice became a statewide movement. A movement that demanded more than justice for one neighborhood. It demanded reform for every forgotten street, every silenced voice, and every stolen home. Marcus stood beneath the rising sun, the crowd assembling in the distance. He wasn't running anymore. He was building something stronger than fear. And this time, the whole state was watching. 6 months later, Pine Valley stood at a crossroads. Gone were the boarded-up homes and shuttered businesses. Instead, campaign posters lined the sidewalk. They didn't advertise fear or division. They offered hope. Left, justice, community, change. Daniel Hollis, a former Army captain and longtime advocate for fair policing, had once served beside Marcus overseas. Now, he stood beneath the same courthouse steps, where Blackwell once ruled with intimidation, offering the town something it hadn't seen in decades: honesty. Election night arrived on a cool autumn evening. The community center overflowed with people, black, white, Latino, young and old. Phones buzzed with live updates. News vans idled outside, cameras ready to capture history. Monica sat with Trinity in the front row, Marcus standing silently in the back, his arms crossed, heart pounding in his chest. The final results flashed on the screen. Daniel Hollis, 68% of the vote. The room erupted. Cheers, tears, and laughter filled the air. Hollis stepped to the podium, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This win isn't mine alone. It belongs to every mother who was silenced, every child forced to live in fear, every family who stood their ground when no one believed them. Pine Valley belongs to its people again." He paused, locking eyes with Marcus in the back of the room. "And we will never forget who fought to give it back." Marcus lowered his head slightly, humbled. But as the crowd celebrated, he knew the real work was just beginning. Leadership wasn't about speeches or applause. It was about protecting the vulnerable when no one else would. And this town, finally free from Blackwell's shadow, was ready to build something new. Together. The fall of Blackwell's regime triggered a chain reaction far beyond Pine Valley's borders. One by one, state investigators and federal prosecutors closed the doors on Pine Ridge security. Court orders froze their assets. Trucks, weapons, surveillance equipment, all seized as evidence. Their contracts across the state were canceled overnight. What had once been a private army feared across rural Tennessee was now a ghost. Randall Keever, the former Pine Ridge commander, faced a federal grand jury for racketeering, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. His mugshot hit national news, a symbol of unchecked power finally facing justice. But for Monica, the real fight wasn't over. Standing in the spotlight once reserved for corrupt sheriffs and greedy developers, she found her voice. What began as a quiet plea for help had become a call for change heard across the state. Invitations poured in from state houses, civil rights forums, and housing justice conferences. She stood before crowded chambers and packed auditorium, speaking not as a victim, but as a mother. A mother who had once stood on the roadside, bruised and humiliated, watching her daughter cry as their truck was destroyed. And now, she stood in front of lawmakers and demanded they answer for every family forced to live in fear. Her message was simple but unyielding. Protecting and serving means protecting all of us, not just the powerful. Housing isn't a privilege. Safety isn't a privilege. They are rights, and we're done asking politely for them. Trinity often sat in the front row, beaming with pride, holding her mom's speech notes as if they were sacred. Reporters followed Monica from event to event, dubbing her the heart of Pine Valley's fight. But she brushed aside the titles. This isn't my fight alone. It's my community's. It's my daughter's. It's all of ours. Her advocacy led to new legislation. The Pine Valley Act, a sweeping bill establishing independent oversight of law enforcement and banning private security firms from engaging in residential evictions, passed with bipartisan support. Marcus watched it all unfold with quiet pride. He knew Monica had carried this community on her back long before he returned. He had fought battles in distant countries, but Monica had been fighting this war right here at home. And now, her voice echoed in places where their cries for help had once been ignored. But as the headlines faded and the crowds moved on, Marcus wrestled with a new challenge. Governor Harper's office called. They wanted him to lead the new statewide oversight commission, a civilian agency tasked with monitoring law enforcement conduct, investigating misconduct, and holding sheriffs accountable. It was a role built for someone with his background, his grit, and his refusal to back down. But it was also a heavy burden. He sat alone on the back porch, the night air cool against his skin, staring out over Pine Valley's quiet streets. Could he lead this without losing himself again? Could he protect his family and still fight for others? Monica joined him, sitting beside him in the dark. You can't fix everything, Marcus, but you can make sure it doesn't break worse. He met her gaze, searching for certainty. You think I'm ready for this? She smiled, tired but true. You've been ready since the day you came home. In the distance, Trinity's laughter echoed from inside the house. And in that sound, Marcus found his answer. He wasn't just fighting to fix a system. He was fighting to build a future where Trinity, and every child like her, would never have to pick up the pieces. He picked up the phone and made the call. I'll do it. Not for glory, but for them. Weeks later, Marcus stood on the steps of the state capitol, surrounded by lawmakers, civil rights leaders, and local officials. Cameras flashed, reporters jotted notes, but Marcus barely noticed them. He wasn't here for headlines. He was here to build something that would outlast him. With a steady voice, he took the oath to serve as the director of the Tennessee Oversight Commission. It wasn't a position of power. It was a responsibility. He spent his first days traveling town to town, listening instead of talking. He met with families who had never trusted a sheriff's badge. He sat with activists who had fought these battles long before his return. And when people asked if the system could truly change, he gave them the only honest answer he had. Left, unless we hold it accountable, every day, without fail. He worked late into the night, combing through case files, reviewing citizen complaints, and pushing for transparency policies most counties had fought against for decades. But even as the job consumed his days, Marcus always came home before Trinity's bedtime. Because no role, no matter how important, mattered more than family. One Friday evening, he walked through the front door to find Monica and Trinity sprawled across the living room floor, piecing together a jigsaw puzzle of the state of Tennessee. Trinity grinned, waving a piece in the air. Look, Daddy, Pine Valley fits right here. Marcus knelt beside her, helping her snap the piece into place. Perfect fit, he said softly. Monica smiled at the quiet moment of peace they'd fought so hard to win. Later that night, as the house grew still, Monica and Marcus sat on the porch swing, listening to the crickets hum. It feels different now, she whispered. Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the streetlights. The first time, it feels like home. The scars of Pine Valley's past hadn't vanished, but in their place grew something stronger. Of community. Hope. Trinity's laughter echoed from her bedroom window, carefree and bright. It was the sound of a childhood no longer shadowed by fear. Marcus leaned back against the worn porch railing, his voice low. "Think she'll remember all of this when she's older?" Monica smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Remember that her family stood up when it mattered most. That's enough." And for the first time in a long time, it was. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring. There would be new battles, new struggles, and new fights to win. But tonight, they were together. Safe. Home. And that was more than enough. As the moon rose high over Pine Valley, its light stretched across quiet streets, sleeping homes, and a family finally at peace. The kind of peace they had earned together. And no one, no sheriff, no developer, no system of fear, could ever take that from them again. The morning air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves overhead as Monica and Trinity walked down Maple Street, the same road where their nightmare had begun. But today, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt free. Trinity swung her backpack over her shoulder, humming softly, her feet skipping across the cracks in the sidewalk. "Mom," she asked, looking up with wide, thoughtful eyes, "do you think people will still remember what happened here?" Monica smiled softly, brushing a hand across her daughter's curls. "They'll remember because we'll remind them, not with anger, but with change, with what we build next." They paused at the intersection where the tow truck once dragged their battered truck away. The street was quiet now, no flashing lights, no shouting deputies, no fear. Just neighbors walking their dogs, kids riding bikes, and a town slowly stitching itself back together. In the distance, a new community garden bloomed on the corner lot, once owned by Pine Ridge, now reclaimed by the people. The children laughed as they planted sunflowers, their small hands dirty with soil, their hearts light with hope. Monica's chest tightened, not with pain, but with pride. This was the road where her dignity was stripped away. Now it was the road where her daughter walked tall. Trinity tugged at her sleeve. "Can I walk the last block by myself today?" Monica hesitated, fear flickering in her heart, but then she smiled. "Baby, you can." She kissed Trinity's forehead and watched her walk away, strong and steady, her braids swaying in the breeze. For the first time in a long time, Monica didn't fear what might happen around the next corner. She trusted what they had built. She trusted the light they had fought to bring back. And she knew their story wasn't finished. It was just the beginning. The ripple started in Pine Valley, but it didn't end there. Across Tennessee, small towns and quiet counties began opening their own books, pulling back the curtains on decades of silence. News anchors reported investigations into private security contracts buried deep in budget reports. School board meetings erupted, with parents demanding answers. Faith leaders spoke from pulpits, calling for truth in the places power had hidden Hostora for far too long. And it spread beyond Tennessee. In Georgia, a retired sheriff resigned after documents surfaced showing illegal land seizures against immigrant families. In Mississippi, a small-town mayor launched an audit into his own police force's relationship with a shady security firm. In Arkansas, a group of students filed a class-action lawsuit after discovering Pine Ridge's sister company had funded surveillance of black student activists. The storm Marcus and Monica unleashed had become a movement, carried by people who'd spent too long waiting for someone else to fix what was broken. But at the heart of it all was Pine Valley, no longer forgotten, no longer alone. On a clear Sunday afternoon, Marcus stood in front of a modest camera crew gathered on the courthouse lawn. There were no scripts, no teleprompters, just his voice. He looked straight into the camera, his words slow, steady, and personal. They keep asking me what it takes to protect your family from corruption like this. They think you need a badge, a title, a gun, but you don't. He paused, the breeze brushing across his face. You need courage, you need community, and you need to love your home enough to fight for it when nobody else will. The message was clear. The responsibility didn't belong to someone else. It belonged to all of us. He stepped back, letting the camera fade to black. But even as the interview ended, his work continued. That night, back home, Monica sifted through a pile of letters that had arrived from across the country. Most were thank you notes. Others were stories. Stories of families facing eviction, parents afraid for their kids, communities wondering if they too could stand against corruption. One letter caught her eye. It was from a woman in Texas. Her name was Carla Reynolds, a single mother. Her letter was simple. Your story gave me courage. Our sheriff is doing the same thing to our town. Can you help? Monica stared at the letter for a long time, the weight of its plea resting in her hands. She smiled softly, her mind already forming a plan. It never ends, she thought. But neither does the fight. She pulled out her phone and dialed Marcus. Looks like Pine Valley's not the only town that needs us. On the other end of the line, Marcus chuckled. Tell them we're coming. Monica stood by the window, the sunset spilling gold across the living room floor. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the next chapter, and they were ready to turn the page. Together. The next morning, Pine Valley woke slowly, bathed in soft light. Gone were the sirens, the fear, the restless nights where families jumped at every knock on the door. Instead, the air carried laughter from porches, the hum of coffee brewing in kitchens, and the steady rhythm of a town finding peace in its own heartbeat. Monica packed Trinity's lunch, while sunlight streamed through the kitchen window. The house was quiet, except for the birds outside, and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards Marcus promised to fix next weekend. He walked in, setting his phone down beside her. Carla Reynolds called. They've got a town meeting next week. They're scared but ready. Monica smiled, handing him a thermos. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Marcus nodded, slipping his arm around her waist. We'll help them, and the next town, and the next. But for now, they would savor this quiet. Trinity rushed down the hall, her backpack bouncing behind her. Ready, Daddy? She called out. Marcus grabbed his keys with a smile. Let's go. They walked out the front door together. No security detail, no fear waiting around the corner. Just a father walking his daughter to school, her small hand tucked in his. They passed neighbors who waved from driveways, shopkeepers who smiled from behind their windows, and children racing toward the playground ahead. This was the same town that had once tried to break them. Now, it was a place they could build something better. And they would. When they reached the school gates, Trinity turned and hugged Marcus tightly. Promise me we'll help the next family too? He kissed the top of her head, holding her close. Always. She smiled and ran inside, her laughter trailing behind her like sunlight. Marcus stood for a long moment, letting the morning warmth soak into his bones. Then he turned and walked back toward home, where Monica waited on the porch, watching with quiet pride. Road stretched ahead of them, long and uncertain. But they wouldn't walk it alone. They had each other, and the countless voices they'd helped awaken. As the camera slowly pulled back, Pine Valley came into view. No longer just a town with a painful past, but a town with a future still being written. The streets, once scarred by injustice, now glistened beneath the morning light. The homes, once silent with fear, now rang with laughter and love. And overhead, the sun rose higher, spilling light across every corner, every street, every heart that dared to hope again. For now, Pine Valley was quiet, peaceful, but forever changed. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, in a town not yet ready to fight, another mother would pick up the phone. Another family would rise, and the legacy of courage would live on. Because once the truth finds its voice, it never goes silent again.